Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is John Henry Soto here. This is a live morning space for artists, filmmakers, musicians, and creators who are navigating the real world of making art. On this show, we talk about positivity, but not the fluffy kind. We talk about what actually stops artists from moving forward, the struggles we all face, and how to move through them with clarity and purpose. We'll also highlight good things happening in the industry, share ideas, suggestions, and practical advice, and most importantly, have honest conversations. This is a live show, so if you're here, feel free to ask questions or join in. This is a place to reset, get grounded, and start the day moving forward as an artist. And good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well out there. It is Thursday, February 26, 2026, and it's 7 a.m. Central here in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As always, we talk about things that have to do with entertainment, filmmaking, things that I've experienced, things that I've learned about, things that I've been educated on, things that I've learned by all the interviews that I've done. I've interviewed hundreds of actors and performers and filmmakers and people in business and wellness. And I've learned so much from them that I want to impart some of that wisdom that I've learned in ways that you can utilize it in your own journey, on your own journey. So today we're going to be talking about the art of acting, but not necessarily the art of acting, because I'm not an acting coach, although I have done a little bit of that, but I'm not really an acting coach. I've done a lot of projects. I've acted in front of the camera. I started in front of the camera. Well, no, I started playing guitar first in a band, but but I started in film in front of the camera originally, and I learned a lot. I studied, I studied the British technique. I studied with Ruth Cullerman out of New York City. She was my acting coach. She was wonderful. She's passed. She was fantastic. You know what? I shouldn't even say she's passed. We're just not in community. I have not spoken to her in many years. She was very senior when I was working with her. She was very experienced actress, and she taught English in Europe. I mean, she was an incredible woman, very very smart, very feisty, and she put me in my place when it came to not taking risks. And so I learned a lot from her and her articles and stuff. I just haven't heard from her in a long time, and I hope she is well. But wherever she is, she was a wonderful, wonderful person, and she is wherever she is. If that makes any sense. Anyway, I've cornered myself into an uncomfortable situation right now, but I'll be fine. All right, so everybody talks about, well, you got to take risk, man. You got to take a risk. That's what it's all about. You got to take a risk. Well, what does that mean exactly? Why is it that you have to take risks in order to create characters and to be able to be comfortable enough in your own skin to then try to pretend to be in someone else's skin that you don't know, someone that you're developing and creating? Well, that's the basic foundation of it, right? I mean, if you're not comfortable in your own skin, if you're not confident in what you're doing, then right off the bat you're going to be having difficulty trying to build a character, right? Acting is an art form that demands a diverse set of skills and deep understanding of different styles. Every actor brings a unique blend of emotional depth, physical expressiveness, and vocal clarity to their work, qualities that can sharpen through intentional study and practice. Method acting, for instance, calls for profound emotional character they portray. In contrast, classical acting, which is what I studied, emphasizes heightened language, precision, and control, requiring mastery of diction and presence. Other approaches, like improvisation, cultivate spontaneity and instinct, while physical theater centers on storytelling through movement and embodiment. So there's a lot of different methods that you can use, and I think it's important to kind of learn all of them because you don't know which one is going to really fit you. So when you take an acting class, Strasberg, or you do any kind of method acting, you have to also kind of realize that that may not be your style. That may be something that you're trying out, a method that you're trying out. You may pull from that, and then you may take another one, another acting style, and then pull from that one. And with all these techniques, you create your own method. That's if you want to go the route of studying. you may actually not want to do that. There's a famous clip out there now. You can Google it. You can find it on YouTube, and it's basically Russell Crowe, Academy Award winning actor, Russell Crowe, talking about um, his method. And he's right next to Ryan Gosling, and is it Ryan Gosling? Yeah, Ryan Gosling. I think it's Ryan Gosling, and they're sitting next to each other, and the audience, somebody they're doing an interview for a show or one of those panels, and they asked him, what acting method do you do? He was, I use the Russell Crowe method. I use nothing. I've never studied. I think he did like a class or something of English in some type of studies of some kind of something. One thing that he did that it had nothing to do with acting, um, and and basically just living life, and he just learned about life, and I mean that was his method, the Russell Crowe method. No type of skill whatsoever. Orson Welles, who's a famous director who directed uh, Citizen Kane, of course, and a lot of other great films that always get overshadowed because of Citizen Kane. But he directed. He was 24 years old when he did that, and he was also an actor. He was also in front of the camera, and he was a very dramatic actor. And he also said, no, I don't study any kind of method, and he's just sweat and tears. He said, just being out there and learning and reading a lot of texts and reading a lot of books and a lot of plays and just understanding, and then watching a lot of plays and watching a lot of films and studying films and watching videos on film. That's what he did. That's how he got there. So you don't have to go out there and think to yourself that I have to go take an acting class to be an actor. No, you could just make a decision, right? Make a decision. I've talked a lot about that here on this show, where you have to make a proper decision first before you can actually tackle any type of anything. But the decision is really, really important. I know it sounds simple, right? Because yeah, of course. Well, I'm just going to decide to do it. Well, there's a difference between deciding that you're going to go out and get yourself a cup of coffee somewhere, or you're going to go out, take the family somewhere, and you're deciding that you're going to do this. There's a difference between making that decision and then making a true change in your direction, in your journey, or maybe get back on the journey that you were on, and you say that I'm deciding right now, this decision is solid. This is something that you don't mess with. So when you sit down and you really make that decision, then you start writing it down. Write down your goals, write down what you want to do, and then once you write down whatever it is that you want to do, and be extravagant, be as big as you want. Soon as you write it down, now you have to figure out, okay, how can I get there? Okay, I want to be a great actor. Okay, how can I get to be a great actor? Okay, one, I have to study, I have to watch films, I have to do something in that realm. Do I want to take classes? I hate group settings. Then I got to be in front of everybody. Do I want to do a private coach, a private acting coach? Okay, maybe that's the way to go. That's what I did. I didn't like I did do some of the group classes as well, but not too not really my thing. And I audited a bunch of classes as well, just to kind of see what they were, and it was just not my. I don't know, I just felt uncomfortable there. And I figured that I wanted to work with someone on a one-to-one basis. So that's what I did. I found an acting coach. I did 1 hour a week. I would go there, and in that 1 hour we would you know go over the different methods and the different, with the the acting is really the classical style of acting, which is really used a lot in British technique. So Anthony Hopkins and a lot of those British great actors, they actually study the classics, right? The classical acting, and it emphasizes a lot, like I mentioned, like on language, precision, control, and a lot of it has to do with diction, but it also has to do with inflections as well, which I didn't mention. But inflections are very important, and how you deliver a line. A line can be delivered many different ways. I didn't take the money, right? Shows that you're offended about something. I didn't take the money. Shows like you maybe you took something else. So how you end a sentence, it can have a lot of energy. You can have a lot of energy when you end a sentence, or you can lose energy. And if you have a long monologue and at the end you start losing a little bit of energy, your voice starts going down and you start not. and then you start coming back up again. And and then there's some actors that utilize that, and that's their style. And some actors are very strong, and they're very always clear, and they never actually miss a beat. They're because they studied that, relentlessly. Meryl Streep, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro. They have a technique that they've implemented into their own work, and they developed it to comfort them the way they operate. They studied, but they have this other thing that they really just work on. you know and it's really has to do with controlling it. But then you have to get all these techniques, right? And then the hard part is, not only you get all the techniques, but then you forget about it. You have to forget about the technique. You can't go and ready to start a scene and thinking, okay, I got to remember my technique. I got to remember this. I got to remember that. No, no, you study it so much, and you know the material so well. You've read the script a couple hundred times. You know the material so well that by the time you get on set, you have that character well developed. You have the voice well developed, and the lines will just come because you've already drilled it so much into your head that the method goes out the window. You already have it. You already know it. You don't have to obsess over it, right? And that's the goal, and that's where you want to get to. You want to get to a place where you're so comfortable, that you don't even think about it anymore. It's I can't remember who said it, but it was an actor, a famous actor said, you study and you study, you study. It may have been, um, what's that actor? I can't remember his name now, but, you study and you study and you study so much, that by the time you get on set, you don't even remember what you studied anymore. All you know is that this character behaves this way, you know, and that's what Daniel Day Lewis. If you ever listen to any interviews by Daniel Day Lewis, he doesn't do a lot of them. He's a quiet guy. He doesn't do a lot of films. But when he comes out with a film, when he's really into a project, I mean, it's going to be a great film because he just puts so much into it. Um, so I think it was him that was talking about that. So check out those interviews. And I do that all the time. I go on YouTube. If you look at my YouTube, what YouTube shares with me, or what they think I like, the algorithms. It's really all about the Godfather film, Goodfellas, a lot of mafia things. I like to watch mafia videos. Music, there's a lot of guitar players there, music stuff. But it really has also, there's a lot of interviews that I love. And sometimes I'll see an interview. I was like, oh, I've never seen this interview with like an old Al Pacino interview. I was like, oh, I never saw this before, and then you get to see a younger Al at the beginning of his journey, talking about the craft and talking about it in a way that you never heard before, and how he's still developing at that moment. And you think to yourself, wow, in this clip, he had no idea he was going to do Scent of a Woman and win an Academy Award. He had no idea he was going to do this. He was going to do that. He was, very, very interesting to watch these early interviews. And you learn a lot about the process, and you learn about what they did early on. And it's no different today. People, because of all the technology and what I'm doing right now, I'm doing this show live from Nashville to my networks. Well, technology did not change acting. The style, the technique of acting, the performing, is not has not developed. There's other methods. There are other acting coaches that develop their own methods, but they're all pulled from the classics and from what we know, Strasberg. And what else did we talk about? We talk about different method actings, and um, just different techniques, right. um, and that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. That's kind of the same. The developing of a character has been the same. So you don't have to really worry about the technology part of it and all that stuff. Worry about the craft. You can buy a book that teaches you method, from 30, 40 years ago, in my opinion, and I'm sure you can pull out some ideas from there that you can utilize in your own performances. To truly excel as an actor, an actor must confront and conquer. So confronting early on, especially, man, it is a pain in the ass, boy. I tell you, it is the most nerve-wracking thing that you can do, is to walk into a room and confront three or four, or sometimes more, completely unknown individuals that want you to do well. By the way, I did a whole show on auditioning before, but they want you to do well. But just you walking in there, you're terrified. And I'll tell a quick story of my first audition ever, the first time I ever set foot in an audition. So I'd been studying already for 1 year, a little over a year actually, with my acting coach. And she was already trying to tell me, you should go out and audition. You should start going out and audition. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go. Yeah, no worry, I'm going to do it. Yeah, don't worry, I'm going to do it. And I was just terrified. I would find any excuse to not go and to not, look for auditions. Then I would look. I would look. This was early, before all the Actors Access and casting networks and all these different platforms that you can use today. This was during Craigslist. And on Craigslist, believe it or not, there was a lot of acting work. It was still new. It was still the Wild Wild West. It was free. And it was sort of like just an online newspaper where people were looking for actors. And, I would look at them and I'd be like, wow, yeah, I should apply for that. Yeah, I could do that. And I wouldn't do it. I was just terrified. So finally, my acting coach was like, she was, like I said, she was feisty. She said, "You got to get out there, and you got to get out there and test the waters and fail and trip and take the risk." And I was thinking to myself, but I'm not ready. And it's like, there's no such thing as knowing when you're ready. You got to get out there. Being ready is nobody is ready when you first go out there. You got to study what you're gonna do in for the audition, and then you have to move on to the next thing. You can't just say be ready. That goes for anything, by the way. In life in general, you can't just say, "Oh, I gotta wait till I'm ready." No, especially for filmmakers. People say, "Well, I'm not ready to make my film." Well, you better make your film, because I guarantee you that 10 years will go by like that, like that, and you will not make your film. You got to just start. I got 10 under my belt that I did short films on my own, and they were hard. And the first one, I got a little lucky on the first one because I had professionals that I did a project, and I met some people on that project. And then when I wanted to do something, I asked a few people out of audacity if they wanted to work something with me, and they did. And I wrote it. I had the actress. It was just me and one other actor, and we had a sound, we had everything in place, and we shot it, and it did really well. My first little film. And then after that, it was an up and down battle to try to figure that what I did the first time. I try to fix things, and I shouldn't have. Now I just kind of shoot now. But um so my story is, I went to go audition finally after being pushed out the door numerous times. I went to my first audition. I am just unable to breathe at this point. I walk into the room and it's just me and one other dude. Now, I'm a short Puerto Rican from the Bronx. This dude was like a 6'2", blonde, blue eye guy, right? So he's sitting next to me. I said, "Hey, what's up?" He said, "What's up?" I sat down. We're obviously going for different roles, I'm assuming. um, and I'm sitting there waiting, and the casting guy comes out and he says, "All right, we're gonna see both of you, John. We're gonna see him first, the other guy, the big tall guy, and then John, we're gonna see you right afterwards." And I was like, "All right, fine." Gives me a little bit more time to breathe and before I pass out. Um, so he gets so the guy goes back into the office, into the room, and I'm sitting there with the guy. The guy decides that he wants to use the bathroom now, last minute. He's like, "Oh, can you just tell him that I'm going to run and use the bathroom?" So I was like, "Oh, okay, no problem." So he goes and uses the bathroom. Of course, 3 seconds later, the guy comes out. He's like, "Oh," he's like, "Where is he?" And I was like, "Oh, he just went to use the restroom." He's like, "All right, John, then why don't you just come in first?" And I was like, "Ah." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So of course I'm shaking, I'm nervous, I'm sweaty. And I walk into a room, and sure enough, it's exactly my nightmare. It's like all these people around this table, and they're sitting behind tables, and there's a mark on the floor where I have to stand, and then I have to do a thing called a slate, where you say your name and whatever information they ask you for. They could say your name and where you live and stuff like that. And so I did my slate. I knew about slate. Thank God that I asked about it and that my acting coach told me about slating. because I didn't know what it was. And if you walk in there and they say, okay, we're going to slate. Okay, can you slate to the camera there? I would have been like, all right, I don't know, come up with some dance or something. I don't know. But luckily I knew what it was. I slated and and I went into my piece, and I did my audition, and they were like, okay, that was good. They're like, John, do you mind doing a cold read? Those of you who don't know what a cold read is, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're reading cold. You have no idea what it is. They said, "Would you mind doing a cold read? I'll hand you. We have a couple of different roles, and I'm thinking maybe you'd be good for this other role." Yeah, sure, of course, yeah, I could do a cold read. So he gives me the cold, gives me this. He goes, "I'll give you like a few minutes to just read it over, right?" So now I'm reading this, and I remember. Oh, wait a second, I forgot the part of in the beginning. Ugh. Okay, so the guy comes out and he sees that the other big guy is not there, and I said, "Oh yeah, he went to use the bathroom." So then he said, "John, why don't you come in?" So I come in. So in my head, I know that they're waiting for the big guy, right? And I'm walking in, the little guy. So I'm walking in, and in my head, I stayed in present time. And this is a very important piece that I want to emphasize here. Staying in present time. When you're in that room ready to audition, look around your environment. Get your points out. Get your vision out to the corners. Look around the room. See who's there. Don't focus again. Don't be weird about it, but get your space comfortable. Know where the exits are. Know where the room is that you're going to go into. If you see somebody going in and out of the room, know if the door pulls in, pulls out, if it turns, if it turns to the left, to the right, all these things. Look at these little tiny things to really get yourself into that environment. Then, so I knew when I walked in, I got myself into the environment. I walked in and I knew they were expecting this tall guy. So, of course, when I walk in, the guy he looks down he looks at me. He's like, wait a minute, this is not the guy. He's expecting the tall guy because the other guy went to go get the tall guy. So I knew that going in. So I said, yeah. So I said, yeah, I'm a lot taller on paper. And I don't know where that came from, but I said it. I'm a lot taller on paper, and the whole room started laughing, and it gave me this breather of like, okay, these are humans. These are just regular people, and I felt so much better at that moment. So I forgot to mention that, which is the most important part of my story. So I get there, I do a cold read. It was a very uncomfortable cold read for to do it with an accent, and it was very very uncomfortable. But it was on my resume because my acting coach told me to put it on there because I do these little accents, which I don't even think you can do anymore because I think it's like not, it's not, I think it's, I don't know, I don't think people care anymore. But either way, I had to do this audition, this cold read, and I did it. And they were like, great. And they were laughing at it because there was some humor in it. So I heard the laughter, which was great. And then and then afterwards, he said, great. And the director says to me, um, that was one of the best cold reads I've ever heard. And I was like, oh wow. I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. And I left that audition flying high. I left that audition. I remember it was at a tall building in Manhattan, and I was hitting the button for the elevator. I was like, oh, man, okay, okay. I did my first one. I always say, you got to do the first one, no matter what it is. If it's a film, if it's an audition, your first writing, your first script, whatever the thing is, once you get your first one done, it feels so good. And then when you get validated and people like it, and that's a wonderful feeling as well. And even if people, like, I remember thinking going into that room that if this fails, I'm not going to stop because I knew that going in. I knew from my acting coach and from my learning that, sometimes you got to crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run. So I knew that I was crawling in there. But when I was leaving there, I was running because I went to about 17 auditions after that in a very, very short amount of time, booked a bunch of stuff. And I've always made the joke that there must have been a shortage of short Puerto Rican actors in New York because I cornered the market at that point. But I was doing a lot of work at it. And it was really fantastic. But it was that initial risk, that fear of failure, that confronting, staying in present time, knowing the material well enough that when you walk in, you're confident. All these things are part of what you have to do. um so it demands stepping beyond the comfort zone, and into vulnerability. Mistakes aren't setbacks, they are essential parts of the creative process. When actors allow themselves to be bold, unconventional, even silly, they unlock new dimensions of authenticity. Letting go of inhibitions doesn't weaken performance, it deepens it. A fearless mindset creates space for truth. And I think a very good example is somebody like Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey in his early work just did not hold back. And he might have annoyed a lot of people, whatever. But when he did Ace Ventura, and whether you like that film or not, my point on it is that he did not hold, he was Ace Ventura. He was that character from the moment. He never thought he was doing anything silly. He was being as silly as you can possibly be, but he was into that, and that's why that film blew up, and that's why that film worked so well because he was so convincing that that was the guy. He was that guy, and look how silly he had to be. So he confronted that. He wasn't afraid to be silly, and I feel that that film really opened up so much ground for him. And I mean, he had been silly on In Living Color, which he was. He did a lot of silly things there, but his performance in Ace Ventura really put him on the map as far as a film actor that can be just as silly on the television that he can in a big screen. And then he refined it. He refined it to the point where it was not, it was the silly, like Liar Liar, one of my favorite films of all time, is such a great example of taking the silly, taking the physicality, but the emotional depth as well, and putting it into that character, Fletchman, and I just love that performance that he gave in that film. And he did this throughout his career. He really just able to take the silly and be brave and fearless and get out there and then develop a characters. And then he had very subtle, like the Mystic Theater. Oh man, is that the name of the film? I can't remember the name of the film, but it is an amazing film. It's about a local theater. I mean, it's just a great, great film. You have to watch that film. Um, what other films? You can think about. Obviously, the Truman Show, right? An incredible performance of the Truman Show. A lot of depth. There was not that much silliness in there. Very little, but there was some silliness. There was very Jim Carrey performance, but it had much more depth to it. So I think about that a lot when you're afraid to take those risks. I'll tell another quick story is with um Danny um Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito is a short actor like myself, and he was in the TV show Taxi back in the 70s, right? I'm dating myself, but it was a great show. It was a very funny show. And I mean, I don't remember that show when it came out. I was too young to really understand the show, but I watched it in reruns growing up, and it was a fantastic show. So he walked in. He had to play Louis De Palmer. If you guys don't know the characters, if you don't know Taxi, he's a very abrasive guy. He's very kind of mean. He's worked in a taxi. He's a dispatch at a taxi company. So he calls in. He answers the phone and tells where the cabs to go and stuff. This was a thing back in the day. I think it still exists in small towns. And that's what he would do. He was a dispatch, and he was kind of grouchy all the time. So he walks into the audition for this thing, and he's got the script, and he goes, "Who wrote this crap?" In character, he took that risk, and it could have gone either way. People could have been like, "Who the hell are you?" But people, everybody laughed because they knew that the character he was playing had to be just like that, and they were aware enough to see that's what he was doing. But he did it in such a convincing way that he was like, "Well, that's Louis De Palmer," and he got the role, right? So let's dive in here and finish up what I was reading here. So, when actors allow themselves to be bold, unconventional, even silly, oh, I read that already. Um, they unlock new dimensions of authenticity. Letting go of an image, I read it. I read this already. It deepens it. A fearless mind creates space for truth. Now, if you want to elevate your acting and stretch your limits, consider focusing on these 5 practices. So these are 5 things that I do. They're not set in stone or anything. You can do whatever you want. Just 5 things just to kind of get you some ideas, some started. Number 1 is commit to regular improvisation. So it strengthens instincts, sharpens listening skills, and builds confidence in the moment. do a lot of improv. I do my show here. I do my. This is all. Some of this is improv. I have written down stuff here, but a lot of it is improv. I'm just coming up with what I'm saying on the spot. I do a show on Sunday nights with a co-host. I do shows with guests. I don't do improv like you sign up for an improv class. You can do that too. That's also a great way. But I think that's important. Number two is study multiple techniques. Like I said earlier, study a lot of different methods. See which one fits you, and then draw from it. Draw from each one, whatever you feel comfortable with. Number three, lean into vulnerability. Choose roles or scenes that challenge you emotionally or physically. Growth lives there. So yeah, pick a role that you would not be cast for. Like I would rehearse things that I know I'm not going to get cast for because I'm not the type. You have to know where you. I'm a short Puerto Rican from the Bronx, right? Now I can do other things. I can speak, so I can change my dialect and things like that. But I don't necessarily know that I'm not going to be a leading man unless it's a film that I write myself, which I did, and I have done that. Um, but you get these roles to kind of get yourself into that mindset. Number four, invite constructive feedback. So honest input from peers and mentors accelerates development. Make sure you trust them. Make sure it's not somebody who you're always kind of afraid to tell things to because they're gonna crap on it. No, find somebody that you really trust for the feedback. And number five, pursue discomfort intentionally. Audition for roles that intimidate you. Perform in spaces that stretch you. Expansion requires friction. Acting is not about playing it safe. It's about stepping into uncertainty with courage. The more willing you are to risk, the more powerful and truthful your performance will become. All right, friends, I've gone over here 32 minutes. This is my 30-minute show. Usually I try to cut it down even shorter than that, but I want to thank you if you're still hanging in there with me. I hope this helps. I hope this gives you some ideas of direction. If you're brand new to the industry, you can always email me at johnhenrysoto@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you and love to help you in any way that I can. If you're a veteran, thank you very much for being here. And if you're just in the business, but you're kind of wanting a little bit more of something, I hope this gave you that, and I hope it helped. Thank you very much for tuning in this morning. Have a wonderful, wonderful Thursday. I'll see you all tomorrow morning, Friday. God bless you all. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We all we got here. And as always, peace.